once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. It's a nice, intimate conversation between myself and Mr. Steve Baxey, where it's just the two of us, and now you.
Yes, it's basically just like sitting next to the fireplace, got a glass of whiskey, everything's nice and toasty, it's gonna be good.
Yeah. Intimate. Intimate. Anyway, we got jazz playing in the background, man.
Jazz in the background. We have suits with robes on top of them.
Yeah, there we go. I never understood that.
I don't get it either, but
it's so fucking hot.
It's so fucking pretentious because you got the fireplace there too. Why do you need all that? You have alcohol to warm, you have a suit to warm, you have a robe and a fireplace? Where are you, in Alaska?
And usually there's like a big fluffy dog.
Yeah, and like a fuzzy carpet.
Man, it's crazy. Anyway, so today we're talking about the 2003 movie Looney Tunes Back in Action. I think it's 2000.
Yeah, it was November 2003 because I remember I saw this in theaters.
Gotcha, me too. I went with my dad. Did you go with your dad?
I went with my sister. My mom and dad just dropped us off. My
dad was always a big Looney Tunes fan, and so that kind of bled over to me, and I watched him growing up.
Yeah.
One of my dad's favorite things to do when he was growing up is he'd go down to he lived in Minnesota, so it was just like, I don't think he ever really saw the sun until he was like 18 and sent to Vietnam.
Right.
So he would go to the store and buy like a 2-liter of Coke and just leave it outside in a pile of snow outside the house, and then watch cartoons for an hour, then go get the Coke and bring it inside and drink the Coke while he was watching cartoons the rest of the morning. But one day the Coke burst on him, and so he told his grandma about it. She said, "There's no use crying over spilt milk." He's like, "But it's spilt Coke."
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't get a chance to tell stories about my dad too often. But yeah, so like, he was always a really big Looney Tunes fan. He had a sweater with Bugs and Taz wearing all like gangsta clothing on it, and then they had like the pants on backwards, and on the back of the shirt it was the back of them, and like the fly was unzipped so their tails could go through the hole.
That's awesome.
Yeah, just stuff like that. So I really loved. I got my love for Looney Tunes from my father.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a franchise that I have a lot of love for, and I remember seeing this with him in the theaters and really enjoying it when I was 13. And then I don't know. This movie kind of gets a lot of hate. I asked Kieran to be here. He might show up. Who knows? But I told him what we were talking about. He goes, "Why Looney Tunes Back in Action?" I'm like, "Well, it's on Netflix." And he goes, "Okay, fair enough." I'm like,
"Wait, does he not like it?"
I guess not. Just based on, gauging from that kind of reaction, right?
That's weird. Because, you said people don't like it. I don't know. Most of the people I talk to, they agree of the live-action cartoon movies, this is one of the better ones because it understands what it is.
Yeah, I think the animation's probably the poorest in this one.
Yeah, that goes without saying, but I do think for the most part, it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I'd tend to agree. I don't know, I guess I'm coming around a little bit, maybe more on the negative side on this one.
That's fair.
In this review, because I'd watched this just a couple months ago. I was going through a Looney Tunes phase, because DC did their Looney Tunes variant covers, which were just awesome.
Genius, I love them, yeah.
Yeah, I got I'm working on stuff for Cap, and so I got out I just got in such a mood, and I got out my Marvin Martian with all the Green Lantern rings cover. That's on display now. I just like it that much.
That's awesome. I mean, if you ever made a trade paperback of nothing but variant covers, that would be the theme to go with.
That and the Lego figure ones were great.
Those were, and then the movie reference ones I really liked.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry. Anyway, so I was back when they were doing the variant covers with Looney Tunes. It kind of got me back into it. So I watched this a couple months ago, and I really enjoyed it again. And then I watched it again for this review. And maybe it was just because I'd seen it so recently, but I guess I just noticed more of the flaws this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this movie before this review. The last time I saw it was at least 2-3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So part of it is the nostalgia, because it's not like necessarily a good movie, but I feel like it understands how much of a cartoon and nonsensical it is. And part of what I enjoy about it is just it's making fun of spy movies, and like Timothy Dalton's there, and it's making it.
Oh my God, you have to do this on Spy Rewind.
I do. It's going to be great, but I go in chronological order with that, so who knows when I'll get to it.
That's funny.
But no, I mean, like the James Bond things, and just it's a movie that's doing nothing but making fun of things, and I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah, I do really like that. I like that it's a Looney Tunes movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's got a lot of the classic bits in here. I mean, it opens with duck season, rabbit season.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really just something I appreciate. It has all the different elements, and it's woven together through a pretty flimsy story.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't mean flimsy as like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it doesn't, but it's just kind of there. It's not really meant to be taken that seriously. It's a fucking Looney Tunes movie, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair to people now, I feel like the bar for Looney Tunes was really raised when we got the Looney Tunes show.
Yeah.
Because that's really good.
Yeah, I'm watching through that too, because I'm just in a Looney Tunes mood again. Are there Looney Tunes comics, Steve? I think they're still doing a series, right?
I don't know if they're still doing one. I know they had one going concurrent with New 52 that I really liked.
I might have to pick those up. Maybe.
Those are hit and miss, because the thing with Looney Tunes you have to always remember is that part of what makes them funny is the animation and the sound effects and the voices and stuff. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they're great, and other times this would be better if it was just the storyboard for a cartoon.
Yeah. But anyway, so like, I don't know, I've watched this, and it's not a good movie. I think the biggest problems with it are chiefly the animation.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that this is a decade after Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, that's the go-to, is that's the movie that really hammered in how to integrate live action with animation, and nothing before it or since has gotten it as right.
I mean, Song of the South has its moments, but racism. So we kind of just ignore that one.
Yeah.
But like, all right, so it's weird because I think they like that this particular moment to highlight how bad the animation. Let me take that back. It's not the animation that's bad; it's the integration with the live action that's bad. I think the moment in this that really hammers in how badly the animation is integrated is they cut it out of the Netflix cut, because you watched this on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's that moment where Daffy Duck, it's right at the beginning, Daffy Duck goes and shakes What's-Her-Face's hand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In the Netflix version, and you guys that have Netflix and are watching this right now, assuming it's still up, yada yada, you can pull this scene up. Their hands are, like, when they shake hands, it's out of frame, and then it cuts like to a wider shot, and you see Daffy's hand is like frozen because she's an ice queen. They for the Netflix cut, they put their hands out of frame, because in the original cut of the film, you actually see Daffy's hand in her hand, but they just integrated it so poorly that they masked out Daffy's hand. And so it's just like this blurry black thing that's disappearing into her hand. It's just really poorly integrated like that. Like, everyone looks like they're carrying around air whenever they're, like, Brendan Fraser's, carrying around Daffy Duck in a later scene, and he just looks like he's not carrying anything. There's a lot of that in this.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. It doesn't integrate with the live action well, and that hurts some of the comedy, because so much of it comes from humans interacting as if they were cartoons.
And that's weird because to be fair, I haven't gone back to Space Jam in a long time because I want to keep the memories.
Yeah.
And I've not heard people say good things about going back to that film. But I've not heard people talk about integration in that film being a problem.
I think part of it with that is the really only live action stuff you have to integrate is Shaquille O'Neal.
You mean...
Or Michael Jordan, sorry.
Steve doesn't sports.
No, yeah, sorry. I don't sports. I forgot it. It's Michael Jordan. But no, you really only have to do Michael Jordan, and there's stuff here and there in that movie where you're doing toon level comedy with physical people, but for the most part, if you're talking about like Bugs Bunny holding or talking to someone, it's mostly just Michael Jordan. So it's easier when it's just one person, and when it doesn't work, it's all right because it's just one person. Most of the comedy is just, it's the real world, and there's a bunch of animated things happening around it.
Yeah, and that's not what's going on in this, right?
Yeah, no, this is very much relying on that to work.
And it's so weird because, yeah, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that's what year?
Let me check real quick.
Yeah, let's see who gets this first. 1988.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, we're over a decade past Who Framed Roger Rabbit at this point.
Holy fuck, that's a long time.
Yeah. And it's that poorly integrated. And that's crazy to me. And it's like, I don't understand why it's this poorly integrated, because I remember watching special features for this film, and they had puppeteers on set doing, the tunes.
I think part of it is because with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, some of the detail of the tunes themselves add to the illusion. Like Roger in several scenes is shaded like Bob Hastings, and like the shadows and the lights and the stuff really play. And he doesn't just feel like he's thrown in there. It feels like the physical properties of the world are affecting him. He just looks different. Yeah. And with Back in Action, I think the tunes, for the most part, are just textured and colored oddly, to the point where they almost always feel like they're standing out. Yeah,
it just doesn't work. I feel like this movie just needs more money thrown in it and more time spent on the detail work.
Which I guess is to be fair, because the budget was like $80 million.
$80 million?
Yeah, it was like $80 million, but I think a lot of that goes to star power with Steve Martin and Brendan Fraser, who is big at this point, and
yeah, this is right off the Mummy franchise.
Yeah, and then Rob Perlman's in here for a bit, and Timothy Dalton's really big. So, like, I think at that point most of this movie was banking on, because there were a lot of cameos. I think this movie's banking on recognizable names for part of its comedy.
Yeah, I agree. It really does feel like they didn't put the money into the animation, which, I mean, it's a frickin' Looney Tunes movie.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you think that you need to put more of your money toward that? Because, I mean, did we really need... I don't know. Ron Perlman didn't need to be in it at all, because he's just a cameo. Steve Martin was about the only actor who I think, like, delivers a memorable performance here. I feel like anyone else could have been replaced.
I think Dalton had to be Timothy Dalton, though. I feel like part of that only works because he used to be James Bond.
It could be any former Bond, though, right?
But he's the cheapest, right? You don't want George Lazenby. Pierce Brosnan demands a lot of money despite him sucking. Roger Moore doesn't act anymore. Sean Connery doesn't act anymore by the time this movie came out. So he's the only one you can get.
Are you sure Sean Connery wasn't acting by the time this came out? Because I'm pretty sure he just had League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Well, that's the movie that made him quit. So if that movie came out right before this, then he wouldn't be acting.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't remember what year that was. That was probably 2002 or 2003, though.
So he just quit because he pissed off Alan Moore, or what happened?
Okay, so with Sean Connery, because this is a fun story, Sean Connery was famously supposed to be Gandalf, and he said no because he thought it wasn't going to go anywhere. And then he was supposed to be Morpheus in The Matrix, and he said no because it wasn't going to go anywhere. And then they offered him League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He's like, well, fuck, I refused this twice. Maybe this will go somewhere. And then he got it, and it sucked, and it didn't go anywhere. So I was like, fuck it, I quit.
That's really funny.
Yeah. I mean, part of it's also that guy's got a real chip on his shoulder at times. Like, James Bond made him popular, but then he also really hates James Bond for destroying his private life. And then he's always asking for more money and stuff, so he was never really comfortable doing big budget movies to begin with.
Gotcha. It's just random little question there.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, oh, Alan Moore, I'm so sorry. That's my really shitty Sean Connery impression.
Yes, I mean, Dalton, just to the point we were making earlier, Dalton, I think, did need to be there. But then again, considering it's 2003, was Mission Impossible out yet?
Yeah.
Okay, you might have been able to get Tom Cruise, but he's probably a bigger name than Dalton.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have the son thing, too, which, I mean, we could have maybe gotten a younger actor than Brendan Fraser, and it still would have worked.
Yeah, you could have saved money if you didn't hire Brendan Fraser.
I do like some of the... I like that Brendan Fraser allows them to make fun of himself a little bit.
Yeah, because...
particularly at the end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Brendan Fraser gets a bad rap. For me, Brendan Fraser is a lot like Paul Rudd, where, like, he's part of the joy of watching him in the movie is just because he's him. He's not a particularly good actor. He's just kind of fun. So and he's not really egotistic about anything. He's not like Adam Sandler. So part of the fun for this movie is just seeing Brendan Fraser being dumped on by Looney Tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And Timothy Dalton just pulling his leg constantly.
Right?
It's just awesome.
Son, no worries. I've gotten out of tougher stuff.
Every fucking time. He's like, this will be alright.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I like that Brendan Fraser allows him to make fun of himself. Like, you see those Mummy movies? I was in those more than that guy. That was really funny. And the whole, oh, I must have gotten you fired. I get a lot of people fired. That was funny, too.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't feel like he was... I think you could do that with almost any actor that had a franchise. I would almost... All right, here's a weird thought. I almost want a Jackie Chan live-action Looney Tunes movie.
Well, that was going to happen.
Fantastic. What?
That was going to happen.
What?
Oh, okay. I assumed you knew this. Okay, never mind. So basically, Space Jam 2 was canceled because Michael Jordan didn't want to do another movie. And so Warner Brothers kept wanting to greenlight another Looney Tunes movie, and Joe Dante, who did this movie but also did Gremlins and Inner Space, was in negotiations to make this, and the original idea was to call this movie as a spiritual sequel to Space Jam. It was going to be called Spy Jam, and it was going to have Jackie Chan in it.
Oh, that'd have been perfect. That dude is a cartoon at times.
Yeah, no, he absolutely is. And at this point in history, he's done a lot of movies where he's basically just a spy, and he would have had the same... And his spy movies were playing off the tropes that things like Matt Helm, James Bond invented. So you would have had a very natural segue into those jokes if Jackie Chan was there.
Man, I could totally go for... That's so weird that kind of comes off that way.
Yeah, that was going to happen. Now... I think what it was is the reason they couldn't get Jackie Chan to do it is because that guy makes hundreds of movies at a time, and this one just kept running into delays.
Gotcha.
So this was just a scheduling thing, I think, on his part. It wasn't that he didn't want to do it, it's just that production for this was pretty tough.
And that's too bad, because that would have been a lot of fun to see him do.
Yeah.
Because he does such cartoony action at times that to put him in... with fighting cartoon characters, particularly that fight in the casino would have been fantastic with him.
No, I absolutely agree with you. That's part of what makes Jackie Chan so memorable to watch. And I think part of it's also this movie had a very had basically a civil war with Warner Brothers, where some of the screenwriters for this movie hated Space Jam to death. They thought it was an insult to Warner Brothers and to Looney Tunes in general. So they kept trying to make movies that would be like, no, this is definitive Looney Tunes. And somewhere along the way, you went down the middle. Instead of making a Looney Tunes movie, and instead of making Space Jam 2, you turned it into Looney Tunes Back in Action.
And that's interesting, because I watched the Michael Jordan commercials that got us Space Jam.
Right.
And I feel like those are definitive Looney Tunes, just with commercials in them.
I agree.
And then I'm going to have to go back and watch Space Jam at some point to really make this argument. Did you watch the new, because I've been looking for Marvin the Martian stuff. Did you see the new, it's like 3 years old at this point, Marvin the Martian Jordan's shoe commercial?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and that's very Looney Tunes.
Yeah, well, I mean, so Warner Brothers knows what they're doing with Looney Tunes for the most part. I mean, ever since Looney Tunes show, they've been pretty good at it. I mean, Wabbit is all right, but for the most part, they at least understand that character.
Wabbit. I've not seen Wabbit.
Oh, do you have Boomerang?
No.
Okay, Cartoon Network is doing a thing now which defeats the purpose of Boomerang, because the whole point of it is it's all coming back at you. But they're doing a thing now where they greenlight new shows for Boomerang that premiere on Cartoon Network for like a month and then just become Boomerang originals. And one of them is Wabbit, which is basically 5-minute Bugs Bunny shorts.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, they're not bad. I mean, they're not great either, but they're not bad.
No, it's just that, like, I want to go back to Space Jam because, I don't know, the memories I have of that, it is Looney Tunes stuff, it's just with basketball, which feels weird. But, I don't know, it worked for kids, so you can't really complain that much.
Was there...
But with this, I feel... did you want to say something?
No, sorry, go ahead.
But with this, I feel like it's much more definitive Looney Tunes. Like, there are... That scene in the art museum is by far, I think, the far and away the best scene in this movie.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. The art museum scene is my favorite. Part of what makes this movie, I think, work more and sells at me more as a Looney Tunes thing. Because, I mean, I saw this in 2003. I was a stupid kid. I'd like everything. But going back to it, part of why I still enjoy it is it knows what Looney Tunes humor is. Like, it understands the rules. Like, Bugs Bunny has to be provoked. Wile E. Coyote has to be the butt of his own joke. Like, that kind of thing. And with this, the easiest thing that you can get rid of, which they did a lot of times when they made these Warner Brothers Looney Tunes movies, that were essentially stitched together old cartoons with some new animation that made it feel like there was a story. What they did with this movie, and I think they did this in Space Jam, I don't remember, was that they made sure that we understood that Looney Tunes, like Animaniacs, think they are actors. And they work on the studio lot. And it's always like this weird in-between space between the fourth wall and animated reality. And that makes the jokes work more because the Looney Tune personalities are caricatures of who these people are. Like, Daffy does things in cartoons because Daffy's a person that always wants to be the star of his movie.
Yeah, and that really does work. They did the Duck Dodgers in the Third Dimension.
Yeah.
It's like this really exploitative, look, 3D technology thing. But they do it with Daffy Duck and Marvin, and it's like Daffy Duck has his little, shed that he's shooting his Duck Dodgers cereals in. And then you have next door, like, Space Rabbit is shooting, and it's got, like, the biggest warehouse in the studio lot and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you always have that stuff. And it is really fun to see that integrated here, where the Looney Tunes are actors with their own sketchbook. And that was really present in the old cartoons, too.
Yeah, that was present in the old cartoons. That was heavy in the 90s with things like Tiny Toons and Animaniacs and Freakazoid, and even Pinky and the Brain when that spun off.
Mm-hmm. And so it's fun to see that stuff really brought to the forefront here, because you not only have the physical comedy, but there's also an extra layer to it, which is kind of been why we haven't seen or we're getting back to it, but for a while there, you just couldn't have Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to sound like a trumpeter here, but, or as I like to call them, assholes.
As most sane people like to call them, yes.
Yeah. But you had this, like, area in the late 90s, early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, where it's just Looney Tunes weren't politically correct enough. You know, they were too violent, they were too offensive. And so this movie kind of comments on that a little bit. There are just a couple scenes here and there. One of the jokes that really works for me is Porky Pig and Speedy Gonzales having lunch, and Porky's like, first they tell me I can't stutter, then they tell me that I'm not funny. Political correctness is impossible. And Speedy's like, tell me about it. And like that's a great commentary on that. Then you have Yosemite Sam and his henchmen chasing after everybody in the what's that fucking guy's name? Jeff Gordon car. They're chasing after everyone in the Jeff Gordon car, and they have the dynamite, and he's like, throw it out. But innocent people could be hurt. I don't care, throw it out. It sends the wrong message to children. And there's just like a lot of stuff like that in this movie where it's like, yeah, sure, maybe if you think about it, but the whole point is you're not supposed to. It's just supposed to be a silly, funny thing that you just accept and, ooh, someone got, like, hit, or ooh, someone got blown up because they were holding a lit stick of dynamite. Why do you have to think about it? Just let it be a thing.
Yeah, and I think part of that and the spy thing, and to like really get into this movie, is that I think Looney Tunes just inherently has to be parody. You can't make a Looney Tunes cartoon that isn't parody of some kind, because they're conceived as parodies of Disney. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Looney Tunes show works, is that it's a parody of sitcom shows. That's why this works, because it's a parody of spy movies. Like, a lot of that commentary of their evolution also has to come back to the very concept of them, which is to make fun of things. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's right or wrong. What matters is it's able to be funny.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is like, even when Looney Tunes did go too far, because it was made by fucking white guys in the 30s and 40s, what do you expect? Eventually they was going to do something that only they would find funny. But even when it went too far, like there's the very famous, or infamous rather, cartoon of Bugs Bunny putting on blackface and singing Mammy. It's not, like, it's still just not okay, because kids definitely wouldn't have gotten that.
Right.
But that's a parody of Al Jolson, not of black people at that point. They're making fun of a very specific scene in, film history at that point. They're parodying the Al Jolson scene in The Jazz Singer.
Yeah, and that's always the intent. That's always... Because Warner Brothers, as a company, is responsible for a lot of the tropes and stereotypes of filmmaking, so this cartoon is just essential to them as a company to make fun of some of the horrible things they do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, Looney Tunes is something that part of it has to be taken as historical context. Like, you can't just watch Rebel Without a Glove of the Looney Tunes show and not know about things like Rebel Without a Cause or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because that's what that episode is.
Gotcha. And there's just a lot of that. Like, I was recently watching through some of Animaniacs, and that show, I quite enjoyed what I was able to get through, but it does get a little repetitive at times.
You can't binge it. It just doesn't work binging.
Yeah, that's the problem I was having. But, like, even that, for early to mid-90s, had a lot of stuff that's just wouldn't fly today. Like, someone I saw on Twitter posted, like, production notes if Animaniacs were made today.
Yeah.
The brothers can't say hello, nurse. The nurse shouldn't be overly attractive. She should be successful and all these other things. And you know what? She shouldn't even be a nurse at all. She's an executive, or she's the doctor. Like, all these notes and, like, just all these things about how it has to be this particular way. And, you know, I'm not one of those assholes who's like, no, everything just needs to be white guy. I'm not one of those assholes who gets on everybody for asking for representation or dynamic storytelling. But when something is making fun of that, when something is using those stereotypes for humor, you kind of have to let it go. Or when something's using something that might be considered offensive in a way that's supposed to be offensive or shocking, or I'm not sure what word I'm looking for. I'm thinking about the whole controversy over the X-Men poster lately.
Oh, with the Mystique thing, yeah.
Yeah, like, he's the bad guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, the context matters.
Yeah, there we go. It's the context. I'm more curious about the context. There are certain cases where I could say maybe the context doesn't matter, this is offensive no matter what. But by and large, I'm not one of those assholes who just can't conceive of why people would be offended, but I do tend to look for context first.
Yeah, and I mean, Looney Tunes has always been the thing that isn't... Looney Tunes is part of the reason censorship is the way it is because that show got away with anything, and at a point, people were starting to get offended, and so we scrutinize this stuff more. And if you go back and watch Tiny Toons, there's a lot of in-jokes there, because essentially in that show, the old classic Looney Tunes are in charge of a school that are teaching the Tiny Toons how to be Looney Tunes. And so there's a lot of scenes there where they're like, well, back in our day, we could do this, and now you can't. But Looney Tunes is always evolving. Looney Tunes is something, like we said, is inherently parody, so it's always going to make fun of something that's happening right now. It's always going to make fun of the context. And so political correctness is certainly a thing around it, but it's not something that it can't... You can very easily make a Looney Tunes show that is inherently Looney Tunes, is funny, and is still politically correct, I think.
Yeah, I think that's mainly what the Looney Tunes show did.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
And, like, this does it, too. It's just like, yeah, we get it. We were made in the 30s and 40s, but we're still timeless in a lot of ways, so we can stick around.
Yeah, this is the part where they're going through some growing pains, because I feel like we didn't have any Looney Tunes between this and Looney Tunes show, did we?
I'm sure there were a couple little things here and there.
There's Looney Tunes Unleashed, but that barely counts.
I don't even know what the fuck that is. That sounds... There were some video games.
Yeah, those are the video games, yeah.
You know, I wanted to do a Let's Play forever ago on the game Sheep Raider, which was the Ralph Wolf Sam Sheepdog PS1 game.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and I had actually was recording it, and there was like an error, because I wanted to do a Versus Let's Play, and there was an error with the other guy's recording software, so his thing was completely lost inside, and my commentary was completely dependent on playing the game with him.
Right.
So I just ended up uploading it as, just the full gameplay. I want to do a retroactive Let's Play commentary on that for a Geeky Gentleman. That'd be fun.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fun.
Sorry, just thinking out loud.
Oh, no,
let me know if you want to do that with me sometime, Steve, because I do have the video posted on YouTube, so we can just sit there and watch it and do commentary the whole time.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. That sounds like fun. But, no, yeah, there were the video games, there was Looney Tunes Unleashed, and there was the Duck Dodgers cartoon. I think those were the three big things.
Oh, Duck Dodgers Green Lantern episode is great.
Oh, so good. Duck Dodgers, I think, was a show that was really good and eventually lost its way because it tried to be archy, but for the most part, it's a really good show. And then
in
Looney Tunes
blackest day, in brightest night, I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Watermelon cantaloupe, yada yada yada. With liberty and justice
for all.
That's great. Looney Tunes Unleashed, for people that don't know, was a show on Kids WB, and I think it continued into when the channel became the CW. That was essentially, we are like 700 years into the future, and the descendants of Bugs, Lola, Daffy, Taz, Wily, Roadrunner are these Looney Tune characters that have superpowers and essentially save the world, and it's completely serious, and everything's played straight, and it's got a mythology and everything.
I'm looking up images. It looks awful.
Its first season's really bad. Its second season starts to make fun of things like Voltron, and it works there, but it's still really bad.
Ah, God, it looks terrible.
That was the big thing. That was the one thing that because it lasted for a while. It had at least 2 seasons, and then it bled into Duck Dodgers' era, and then we got Looney Tunes show. So at least it kept the brand alive for whatever that's worth.
Oh, God, I almost wish it doesn't exist.
I would recommend you watch a couple episodes. I would love to know what you think of them.
Oh, God, it looks so bad. This is looks like the shit version of, after Batman Beyond came out, and it shouldn't have worked, but it totally did, everything tried to do, a future version. Because we had, Spider-Man Unlimited, and then we had, Zorro Generation Z, and, everything was awful. This looks exactly like that. This looks like Looney Tunes Beyond. Oh, man, then just Google imaging this. This is god-awful. Okay, anyway, let's get back to Looney Tunes Back in Action, just on the movie itself, because, I did want to just talk about Looney Tunes, so that was fun to do.
Yeah.
But let's get back to just this movie itself. So, alright, so what doesn't work for you about this movie, besides the integration of animation?
Okay, integration of animation's one thing. The other big thing for me is I feel like in places the gags run on a bit too long. It's only a 90-minute movie, and I think for this material that's exactly how long it needs to be, and it's exactly the right time frame, the right mindset to kind of go from gag to gag to gag to gag. My issue with it is more so just there are places where, when you get to Yosemite Sam, when you get to some of the stuff towards the end of the movie with Steve Martin's character and such, where the movie kind of just stops and remains a gag, as opposed to it, flowing into the next one, if that makes sense.
To some extent, I think that some of the scenes do go on a little long, but those are... My main problems are the ones where it's mainly people doing things. The scene where they get the blue monkey and it's Brendan Fraser, hitting poison darts with the machete. That seems like it lasts for a really awkwardly long amount of time to me.
And see, I think that just goes back to that would be funnier if Brendan Fraser, or the live action, the animated stuff was just integrated better, because sometimes it just feels like he's doing Looney Tune things but not moving like a Looney Tune.
Yeah, and Jackie Chan would have been a better pick for this.
And it almost happened.
God, that's so crazy. Anyway, there's that scene, and then there's the Michael Jordan cameo bit. I think went on for a little while too long as well.
Especially considering that Back in Action was not that long ago.
You mean Space Jam?
Or Space Jam, sorry.
God, Steve,
it's names today.
Yeah.
Well, okay. To be fair, Space Jam was '96. This is 2003, so maybe it was a little while. At the same time, though, Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. People have seen him all over the place. You don't really need to dwell on it.
Yeah. It's weird. No, so you get that scene seems to go on a little while. So yeah, I think I can see where you're coming from on that. I do like that this is mainly Daffy's movie, though.
Which is something Looney Tunes progressed into, because when we got the later cartoons, it would always be a little bit of a meta thing of lifetime achievement awards for Looney Tunes, and Bugs would get an award and Daffy tries to steal the spotlight, that kind of thing. So it seems like it was very natural to just make a movie that involves Daffy more than it involves Bugs.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the kind of comparison that has come up over the last couple years, which is that Bugs is Superman and Daffy is Batman.
Yeah.
Because, back in the day, everyone loved both of them, but everyone loved Bugs more. Everyone loved Batman or Superman more back in the day,
right,
back when they were originally created. But as time's gone on, Bugs is still really popular, but I think Daffy's just become more identifiable, even though they make him just a bigger asshole.
And I mean, I think part of that is just it goes to the consciousness of Duck Dodgers, and then it goes into Looney Tunes show where Daffy's kind of the main character of that show for the most part.
He certainly is.
I mean, the Bugs has side plots, but that's what they are. They're side plots in Daffy's adventures because he's Bugs' roommate.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think Daffy's just kind of become the face of Looney Tunes. And I think this is a big step toward doing that, because this really is, more than anything else, Daffy's movie.
Okay, now, this might be a question that leads to another topic. I don't want to keep dwelling on Looney Tunes in general, but I think it's interesting because we don't get to talk about this often.
Sure.
But with the way Wabbit is the way it is, where it's 5-minute Bugs Bunny shorts that don't have any kind of theme, right? It's not like Duck Dodgers. It's not a consistent setting. It's just Bugs Bunny cartoons. Do you think you can do that with Daffy the same way you can with Bugs? Because I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, I think Daffy needs a story where his Bugs just kind of fits into any situation, right?
Yeah,
all
I
you need for
agree
Bugs is he needs to be provoked.
Exactly, and I agree that Daffy's certainly become more prevalent, but I'd resist saying that he's the face of Looney Tunes because it feels like Bugs is the thing everyone knows Looney Tunes as, and then Daffy is the thing they come away with after they've watched Looney Tunes.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like that in this we get, not just one version of Daffy. He gets to go through, his different things.
Yeah.
Because when Daffy was first introduced, he was just kind of crazy. He was a loon. He did the woo, 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 woo.
Yeah, just
thing.
bouncing off of rooms and stuff.
Yeah, and he does that in the beginning of this movie. He starts out being an asshole and getting himself fired, and then when Brendan Fraser is supposed to kick him off the lot, I also really like the joke who's we own the name Daffy Duck. Well, you're not going to keep me from saying it. Daffy. Wow, they did. That was a really good gag. But
yeah.
Anyway, as Brendan Fraser chases him around the lot, he does the loony Daffy thing. Woo, woo! And as he runs away and he goes down they do that classic Looney Tunes gag where they're able to go through two-dimensional paintings with perspective and everything, and then the other one isn't. And I love how they turned that bit on its head. That was great.
Yeah.
It's just everything. Daffy gets to do that part of himself too that got so left behind as the original cartoons went on and on.
Yeah, I mean it's Daffy's history. It's Daffy kind of having an arc, where it's him not ever being able. By the end of the movie, it's him just getting to be himself. But I think the point of it is that we wouldn't want Daffy to be any other way, despite his progress. Daffy is not the character that should have learned his lesson. There's another episode of Looney Tunes show where Daffy goes to therapy, and he becomes a good person. And by the end of the episode, he's not anymore because you can't keep Daffy that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of thing, and I like that character arc for him, and that fits perfectly with him being Batman, of a guy that is very capable of being a happy person, but just isn't. Yeah,
and that's what I was getting at with the Superman Batman thing is, Batman's just Superman's still the symbol for DC, but Batman's probably their biggest property.
Yeah.
And Daffy seems to be becoming their biggest property for Looney Tunes. Is he's the one that you go to for a lot of the story selling. And I think this was a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know how well received this movie was initially. I know I saw it in theaters. I know everyone who I was in school with at the time saw it in theaters, but that could mean anything. We were kids, so...
Mm-hmm.
I feel like at the time people liked this.
I think so at the time, but that's general. A lot of the time, audiences don't just hate a movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Superman Returns and people loved that initially.
Yeah, and so this I think had fairly positive reaction at the time, but it seems to just get kind of trashed when I hear people talk about it in retrospect.
Yeah, and I guess the point I would just be making is, at the time it was popular, at the time, Daffy was the star, and I think that's the reason that Warner Brothers has pushed him forward, is despite this project for them in the long term not being a good thing, it did keep Looney Tunes alive, and it did evolve it. And I think, as far as Looney Tunes history goes, Daffy is the easiest character to keep funny and keep politically correct. Like, Daffy doesn't dress up as women. Daffy doesn't have a stutter. Daffy doesn't put on blackface.
Well, I mean, he does have a bit of a, like, he has a list.
He's got his list, yeah, but I mean, that's just him, part of his quirk of always being angry, too.
Yeah.
So it's easier to, like, just slide that under the rug.
Yeah, and I mean, Bugs, I like that this addresses Bugs dressing up like a woman, and I like that they brought that into the Looney Tunes show, too. Bugs still, on occasion, will dress up as a woman. There's a whole episode where Speedy is falling in love with Bugs dressed up as a woman, and they didn't, like, feel the need to be afraid to do that just because we're more aware of, you know, cross-dressing isn't just a silly thing. It's something that people actually do, and it's like this big emotional thing for them, and it can lead to other things, and we're just not going to get into it because it's a very complicated issue.
It is. But then again, the Looney Tunes show, that just speaks to the brilliance of that show because it makes a lot of that work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just Bugs needs to disguise himself, so what does he do? He naturally goes to being a woman. Crack did a great thing that actually, a great video where they actually made a really good argument that Bugs Bunny is a transgender icon.
I mean, I'd buy it. That's kind of what he's become at this point.
Because the only time he gets to feel safe and loved is when he dresses as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting.
Right?
Well, they did the same thing with Chicken Boo from Animaniacs.
Yeah.
Because he does the exact same thing where he puts on an identity.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. No, it's just stuff like that. It's just they don't necessarily transition seamlessly. There are still things in the past of these characters that I don't know if I'd go so far as to say shameful, but certainly embarrassing. But that doesn't prevent them from still transcending that, because it's not like that's what they were only about.
Yeah, I mean, Looney Tunes at this point in history had to have been around for at least 60, 70 years. So they've got a great history of being really funny, as well as some embarrassing moments here and there, and I think that's where the movie's title of Looney Tunes Back in Action really comes in, which is, this is them finding themselves again by the end. Mm-hmm. Like, by the end of this movie, they're just being Looney Tunes. They're not worrying about the greater consequence. Because the movie is about legacy with Brendan Fraser and Timothy Dalton and all that. So it is about Looney Tunes acknowledging how old they are, how some of their gags work and don't work anymore, and then ultimately just getting back into the theater mentality of just, they're there to put on a show, but they're there to also poke fun.
Yeah, and that's why I think the scene's like, you know, it starts with the over-analyzing of things, of like, oh, well, is it funny if we have, like, things aren't funny anymore, they're disturbing. You know, Rabbit in a Dress was funny back in 1940, but now it's disturbing or you know, makes you question things. And then Bugs Bunny's like, listen, lady, if you don't find a rabbit wearing lipstick funny, then you and I have nothing in common. And so there's so many damn layers of offense to be taken with that joke. And I just love it.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot of that there. And particularly with Bugs, who's completely static. Bugs is a guy that's always been the same.
Yeah, and then, like, importantly, in the early part of this movie, we have Porky say that he's not allowed to stutter anymore because, you know, it's offensive, but then he's not funny. And then we get to the end of this movie, and what is the ending gag? It's Porky's stutter not allowing him to say his one damn, like, famous line that he's known for. And so that's just really, really clever. Yeah. That they like, yeah, we get it. We've, you know, maybe this went too far at one point in the past, but these are traits of our characters, and this movie isn't about apologizing for those things. It's about embracing our history and just trying to be more more level-handed, more
even-tempered,
balanced with even-tempered. There we go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's so much of the fun of this movie comes from the perspective of Looney Tunes history, and I think maybe part of the reason people have soured on it over time is it's not necessarily because I feel like if you just cut away all of that interesting stuff that it's doing with the character's history and just take it as its own movie, it's not that great, but it's also asking you to bring that historical baggage there. So I feel like this is not a movie for people that don't already like Looney Tunes.
Certainly, I wouldn't show this to someone to try to get them into Looney Tunes.
This is also not the first thing you show your kid when you're trying to introduce them to Looney Tunes.
Certainly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. This isn't the first property to go to. This is very much a product of its time.
It is,
because we just had Space Jam, and before that there was Cartoon Network was still playing the actual Looney Tunes back in the day. So, it's not like we hadn't had them for a while, but it'd been a long time since we had anything new that was 100% undeniable Looney Tunes.
Yeah, and this is importantly the point of transition, where Looney Tunes was a thing before this and it became a thing after this. You don't have Duck Dodgers without this. You don't have Looney Tunes Show without this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have Lunatics Unleashed without this, which, take or leave, I don't know, it just depends what you think of that show.
Oh, God, that just... What was up with that future trend? Because it shouldn't have worked and it did work with Batman, we just assume that it will work with everything? What the fuck were they thinking?
I don't know. It was hilarious.
Dude, you should watch just one episode, the pilot for Zorro Generation Z. It is so bad. Okay, we're superhero guys. We understand there's a certain level of suspension of disbelief for not recognizing someone that you've known and just because they have a small domino mask on or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a character in that show. She's the only redheaded woman character we see in that show. She's the daughter of the evil mayor, and she comes into a room where the mayor and Zorro are fighting, and she's wearing a purple trench coat and has on pink see-through sunglasses and fights her father and helps Zorro escape, and her father doesn't recognize it's her. I'm it's literally not even hiding in her face. It is see-through. This makes no damn sense.
That's awesome.
I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with that series.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway.
So Looney Tunes back in action is a weird thing. I feel like it really takes some distance to appreciate, but I think that's kind of why I like it, is that it's exactly the kind of movie we needed at exactly the right time, which it sounds simple, but it's kind of not. You look at great movies like Cabin in the Woods, and I love that movie to death, but it should have been made 15 years ago, not in 2013 or 2014. It's a movie for the 90s. And Back in Action's not that way. Back in Action came out in 2003, that's when it needed to come out.
Yeah, so I don't think it's aged incredibly well, particularly with the integration. Which, again, that is the biggest flaw that I can give this movie, is just the way the animation is integrated, particularly with how damn well it was integrated in the museum scene.
Yeah.
The rest of the movie, a bit up to that quality, would have been in great shape.
And I mean, again, 88 was Roger Rabbit. Come on.
Yeah, there's no excuse for it to be this bad. And yet, it has just a certain level of charm to it that I can't really hate on it. I don't know. I quite enjoy this movie. Again, I don't think it's something you can go back to too often, because like I said, this time around watching it, after just having watched it a couple months ago, I was a little... I didn't love it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did a couple months ago. So I think it's one of those things to only watch every so often, every couple years at the most.
Yeah, and it requires a different kind of criticality, if that's a word. whatever tense that would be. But it's the kind of movie that you watch for more of a meta experience than you do for the film itself. Also, so like even if you go back to this and you want to take it on its own terms, you have to take it on its own terms in the context of like, okay, this action the Toon is taking is not part of the story; it's part of the legacy of the character. Like a good example is that I always like to go to is The Spy Who Loved Me. The whole point of that opening action sequence where Bond jumps off of a cliff and then the parachute opens and it's this big dramatic moment of him being able to land safely is that it's a meta commentary for Eon Pictures nearly hitting bankruptcy and then surviving from the very brink with that movie. Mm-hmm. And so you can only look at it on those terms. And I think it's the same way with Looney Tunes Back in Action. Like the stuff you mentioned with Daffy's quirks, some of the stuff with the PC humor, and a lot of the stuff towards the end and with some of the spy culture stuff, you can only look at it in terms of its history and not its necessity within the story.
Yeah, but importantly, the bits that work independent of all that stuff too.
Yeah, because
like the Looney Tunes humor,
Looney Tunes.
Yeah. When the Looney Tunes humor is just being Looney Tunes humor, it's great Looney Tunes humor. Like I love the Duck Dodgers bit where he's trying to put on the jetpack.
Yeah, that's great.
It keeps fucking exploding. And he looks at that last one, and he's just got this look on his fucking face. He's like, fuck. He wants to say fuck, but he says duck, and it explodes anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's lots of stuff like that. I love the opening of this movie. I think that's really good, and I love the Batmobile thing at the beginning.
Yeah, that's really funny. Batman's just chilling there. Like, I want to see that Batman movie because that was actually kind of a good Batman costume.
Yeah, I dig it.
It's better than both Schumacher ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff at the very beginning that's just good, classic. Almost, because Bugs Bunny, Groucho Marx, obviously, it's a lot of, like, Marx Brothers humor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just great stuff. Brendan Fraser walking with Daffy Duck, and Daffy Duck being a smart ass about how he's gonna turn Daffy over to the executive lady, and then the water tower collapses.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great stuff like that. I really, really enjoy what's going on in this movie from time to time. All the physical comedy bits, all the Looney Tunes humor, really works for me. I love the bit with Steve Martin and Wile E. Coyote. That is so ridiculously funny. Like, it's one of those things with Wile E. Coyote where he is just such an utter fuck-up that you can do jokes with him that I don't think you could do with many other characters, which is to just have sound effects be his failures. I really like that. Like, you don't even need to see it happening. You can just hear it and know something bad happened to him, and that's really funny to
That's
me.
part of the brilliance of Wile E. Coyote, is that it's just a concept that works in animation in a way it doesn't anywhere else.
Because that all, interestingly, to get into the history again, that all started with Tom and Jerry was the first one to do that dynamic of you have character A and character B. Character B wants to kill character A, but no matter what, he never will succeed.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Chuck Jones, he got a hold of that and he's like, okay, let's crank this to 11. And so he just had the rules of physics completely fuck Wile E. Coyote whenever it suited him. And that was funny as shit.
Yeah.
There's actually, it's so weird. I don't know if you've heard of this one. Did you ever watch the Man vs. Cartoon show?
I think so.
Yeah, with the I think they're Phoenix University professors or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, for those that don't know, what they do is you had these physics professors watch a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon where they'd see one of Wile E. Coyote's, contraptions fail. And so then they would work out a way to make it work. And then they'd get, like, a little inflatable Roadrunner and have it go through the thing, and they'd actually catch it. And so it was kind of like Mythbusters, but just fucking tomfoolery, and they're not trying to, like, prove whether some bullshit is possible or not. They just fucking, okay, we're gonna make this happen now. They go straight to the best part of Mythbusters, which is when they just say, fuck it, we're just gonna make this happen. Yeah. That's just really fun. I think it only made it for about a season, but it was just a really neat, clever idea, and I quite enjoyed it. And it was, a great excuse to see explosions happen.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I now that you mention, I do remember that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I like Wile E. Coyote quite a bit. He's one of my favorites.
Wile E. Coyote is one of the best creations of Looney Tunes, and one of the only ones that you can't make work unless you follow the rules. You can make a Bugs Bunny cartoon work where he's not provoked, because sometimes Bugs is just an asshole. But if you don't follow the rules of Wile E. Coyote, the cartoon isn't funny.
Did you like it when Wile E. Coyote talked in those couple episodes with Bugs?
With Bugs, yeah. I feel like for those contexts, it's alright. But when it's just him and Roadrunner, no.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think with Bugs, you kind of need him to talk. And I like the voice that they give him of this pompous, pretentious ass.
Why
thinks he's always right.
Genius.
Yeah, I think that works. I think if you were going to give him a voice and you were going to give him lines, those were it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I really like again, talking about can we just do Looney Tunes variant covers once a year? Because
yes, please.
We're awesome. I really like the Cyborg one.
The Cyborg one's great. I love the Dark Knight Returns Tweety Sylvester one.
I didn't get that one. Yeah, I just really like Wile E. Coyote unboxing an Acme box with Cyborg in it. That's really funny to me.
There's another one with Sylvester and Tweety where Damien is trapped in a birdcage.
Oh God, that's funny.
There's a lot of them. I love those covers. They're great. And then
they do one for the Batman 66 book?
Yeah.
What is it?
Oh, I thought you said they did. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
They might have. I don't know. That would have been awesome, though.
66 Looney. O-O-N-Y.
But the other thing I want to ask you about this particular movie is voice acting wise. Do you like Joe Alasky or do you like Jeff Bergman?
No, I don't know who did who.
Okay, Joe Alasky's the guy that does all the voices for the Looney Tunes in this movie. He's pretty much the one that does them for the movies in general. Like he was here, he did a voice for Yosemite Sam and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He's mostly the movie guy. And then the other one, Jeff Bergman's the guy that did a lot of the later cartoons, the ones that does the Looney Tunes show, the one that did Tiny Toons.
Interesting.
Those are the two guys that have historically been the successors of Mel Blanc. So most conversations I have, people tend to prefer one over the other. I've always liked Bergman more, but I was just curious if you like Bergman or the guys that did it here.
I think they did it here just fine. Honestly, it's one of those things where everyone's just doing an impression of Mel Blanc. So
exactly, it's tough.
Whoever can get the closest is who makes it. I don't want anyone to make Bugs Bunny's voice their own.
Yeah.
It's just whoever can get the closest to Mel Blanc wins.
There was a special with... there was a Netflix documentary about voice acting that I really, really recommend that everyone should watch. It's made by Joe DiMaggio, who does voice acting for everything, including Bender and Joker and Under the Red Hood. In that documentary, there was a voice acting coach telling you mechanically how you create the voice for Porky Pig. Like, where do you stutter? How many stutters are there? What syllables you use? It's really interesting. Like, there is a formula to make sure you sound like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
But yeah, you're right. You shouldn't reinvent those. You should always just go with the impression.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where, like, I feel it's kind of hard to call that acting to a certain extent because
it's tricky.
You don't ever tell actors to do impressions.
Yeah. No.
Oh my god, I gotta get this. I'm sorry. I started looking at the variant covers, and there's a Flash number 46's variant is Speedy and Roadrunner outrunning the Flash.
Oh, that one's great. I love it.
Oh God, sorry guys. Okay, I've got to go get that.
There's lots of great covers. I wish I had all of them, but I was just curious because that could be a point of contention for people. I mean, I think they're both fine, but just because I like Bergman more, I always just prefer him.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like I said, if you're asking an actor to do an impression, then that's just from an actor's perspective. They really don't like being told to do an impression of someone else.
And you really shouldn't. Like, acting-wise, it is part of the performance will always be your own. And when you have something as universal as Mel Blanc, it's tough. That's the rule.
Yeah, it's just a real hard spot to put yourself in. But I feel like at the same time, voice actors kind of pride themselves. Like, you know, I've heard of voice actors having competitions amongst themselves when they're, like, waiting on a job or whatever to see who can do the best this character.
Yeah.
And Looney Tunes characters are the ones that come up quite a bit in those little infightings.
Last bit of history. Have you heard the story about Mel Blanc going into a coma?
I remember that he got in a car accident and, like, everyone sent get well soon letters to Bugs Bunny.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that was part of it. Essentially what it was is after the car accident, people said get well letters. He was in a coma. And after he woke up, he actually did a lot of the voice acting for these cartoons in his hospital bed. They just set up a booth around him,
that's fun.
which is fun. But part of what I like that I love about that story is they got him to come out of the coma by having the doctor show up and say, Bugs, are you in there? And then he'd answer to you as Bugs Bunny.
Wow.
And then to say, or Taz, are you in there? And then he'd answer you as Taz. And slowly through Looney Tunes, he got out of the coma in character.
That's crazy.
I know, it's awesome. It's part of that documentary, the voice acting one. I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix. It might actually be an original, so it might be there. I don't know.
That's really cool.
Yeah, no, those characters are so part of who he is that at this point you can't do anything but an impression. They are his.
Yeah, and there were a couple that like he handed off to other people because just doing the voice was too difficult for him as he got older. I think that happened with Taz and maybe like Foghorn Leghorn, because just it was Taz and Yosemite Sam. Yeah. Those two I know he handed off because they just got too hard on his voice over time.
And Taz, notably, is voiced by Brendan Fraser in this movie.
Oh, interesting.
Just because the director was really impressed by how he was able to mimic that.
Yeah, it's cool. I gotta play the Taz Wanted game. I started on that one and I didn't quite get into it.
Did you play the tie-in game for this?
I didn't know there was.
Oh, okay. It was a GameCube game.
Oh, interesting. No, I did not. By my answer of no, I didn't know that it existed. I did not play it.
I didn't play it either. I was just curious. I heard good things.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know. It's one of those things. I just the whole idea of voice acting is something that's so strange to me because I have no ability to really mimic my voice or change my voice whatsoever. I get really frustrated with myself for that because I think I could act better if I could just change my voice, but I have no capability whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I got the same thing. I mean, voice acting's tough.
Yeah.
It's not, and a lot of the voice actors will tell you this. It's not about doing an impression with one line. It's about doing an impression and just sticking with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh well. What else can we talk about with this, or do we need to talk about anything else with this?
The very last thing I want to mention, because I always go to this thing, and we've talked about this guy a lot. He always seems to come up, but this is the very last movie that Jerry Goldsmith composed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and if people don't know, he's the guy that did the Rambo movies. He did Chinatown. He did Alien. He did Gremlins. He's one of the biggest, or was one of the biggest composers of his day. He died not even a year after this.
Oh wow, that's sad.
Yeah, and as far as last works go, this one's just average. I don't think the score is particularly unique. It's just kind of retrofitting the original Looney Tunes theme.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just making it, updating it basically. Yeah. the score doesn't stick out to me too much in this. I really like the scene in Area 52. It's kind of crazy that we had Daleks on screen in America before Doctor Who got big again.
That was fun, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, and I hadn't watched this until I watched it a couple months ago. I hadn't watched this since I became a Doctor Who fan.
Right.
So a couple months ago when I watched this, I was like, "Holy shit, Daleks!"
It's always fun to see those kinds of things in the background.
Yeah, interestingly, each of those robots. I mean, Robbie, everyone recognizes.
Yeah.
One of them was just a generic thrown together from set pieces, but the weird brain crawly thing was from an actual movie. But my favorite was the robots or whatever, the aliens that are in the mason jars with Marvin. The gorilla with the space helmet and the rabbit ears. The story behind that is a thing of beauty, Steve. So there's this guy, and I cannot remember his name, but he got a lot of work in old Hollywood for one specific reason.
Right.
He had his own gorilla costume. He owned it outright. He owned his own gorilla costume, so movies could save money by hiring him to play gorillas in their movies. So if a writer wrote a scene where there's a gorilla that does something, they'd go to him because he just owned his own gorilla costume.
It's just
and
so
for
convenient.
For this really just absolute shitty sci-fi movie where robot killed everybody on Earth except for 5 people that were in a cave or a vault or whatever. They needed an alien robot guy. And so they just got him and put a space helmet on instead of the gorilla hat. And you can actually hear one of his lines in this movie as he goes like, "Humans." So that's just really funny to me that they threw him in there. It's such
awesome.
a classic reference that no one would get that I really, really appreciate.
That's part of the fun of this movie, though, right? I think the production history is really interesting. The references are great. It's a Looney Tunes movie. It's a Looney Tunes movie about Looney Tunes. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Wasn't that lovely? Anyway, that'll do it. Let's go ahead and wrap this up with a score. Steve, you go first.
I will give this, because rewatchability is an issue, and because so much of this movie really depends on the context, I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5 Blue Monkey Diamonds.
Okay. I'm going to go slightly lower than that because the integration of the animation is, in my mind, inexcusable.
Right. That's fair.
Given when this came out, but your other issues do come up for me as well. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 exploding jetpacks that are comically timed. Yeah, I think that's a fair score because I do enjoy it enough that I think it's plenty fair to call it at that.
And just to reference our own continuity, if you go back and listen to the show we did about people either loving or hating things, just know we spent this whole review talking about why we love this movie despite its flaws and still gave it a relatively lower score.
Right?
It's all because of the conversation.
Like
the score
Steve
means jack shit compared to the context of the conversation.
Yeah, it's almost like Steve is actually objective about things and doesn't hate everything.
Right? What kind of nonsense world is that?
You should just start doing reviews where you just take on the I hate everything guy.
I will only review things that are universally panned and then universally pan them.
Okay. Steve, what are we going to talk about next time?
Okay, so next time, discussion topic, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm I think it might be fun, because I've been kind of rolling over this around in my head a little bit lately. I think it might be fun to discuss the rating system.
Like the
MPA rating system and like the guidelines for like what is it like for you if you're a parent or if you're a kid, or like if does it really mean anything? Do we need it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch this film. Is not yet rated.
Yeah, that's partly why I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I wonder if that's still on Netflix. It's a really good documentary about how just bizarre the Hollywood rating system is.
Yeah.
It also made me watch a really good movie called But I'm a Cheerleader. I was unaware of that movie's existence until watching this film is not yet rated, and damn, that's a good fucking movie. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that'll be a fun conversation, particularly in a post-Deadpool world, and I'll probably mention that movie a few times when we talk about that.
Deadpool had issues with this? That's funny.
Well, it doesn't have issues with it. The big thing I'll mention here, and I will mention there, is simply that movie kept being talked about as a really hard R, and I don't think it is.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Please join us next time when we talk about ratings and the MPAA and censorship, I guess.
Yeah, for the most part.
And until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Politician.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things. That's all, folks.